night of wonder, still and silent, heaven's brilliance from above. A light of glory pierced the darkness, mercy pierced my heart with love. This is Jesus, King of glory, here to rescue from the fall. Son of God, who comes to save us, Prince of peace and Lord of all. Oh, the mystery, who could fathom? God would leave his holy throne for a manger, for a sinner, for us all to be his own. This is Jesus, King of glory, here to rescue from the fall. Son of God, who comes to save us, Prince of peace and Lord of all. Rejoice, he is with us. Rejoice, hope is here. Rejoice, he is with us. Rejoice, hope is here. Rejoice, he is with us. Rejoice, hope is here. Rejoice, he is with us. Rejoice, hope is here. This is Jesus, King of glory, here to rescue from the fall. Son of God, who comes to save us, Prince of peace and Lord of all. For the heart so prone to wander, for these feet so quick to flee, God is here and love is reaching for the lost and least of these.
God's delay is not God's denial. That's what we learned last weekend. If you weren't with us, make sure you go back to our website at webstergardens.org and check out our message from last weekend. We looked at this amazing story about Zechariah and Elizabeth. They both had expectations. They expected they were going to have a child, but they didn't. And now they were both old and unable to have children. God had still not answered their prayer. Their expectations had been shattered, and now those expectations had turned into disappointments. You can identify with that. You've had the same experience. Life did not go as you expected. And certainly this year has not gone as expected. God does not say yes to everything we ask, but God does say yes to everything He has promised. And God says yes at the proper time. That's His time. So, in God's proper time, Zechariah, this old priest, he was chosen by Lot to go into the temple and burn incense. Gabriel the angel appeared to Zechariah, and Gabriel said, "Your prayers have been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, and you're to give him the name John. He will get the people ready for the Lord." Zechariah's immediate response was, "No way. That's impossible." Now, sometime you've given up on God, and you told God the same thing. "No way. That's impossible." And even though Zechariah didn't believe, God still kept His promise. But because Zechariah didn't believe, Gabriel the angel told Zechariah that he would not be able to talk until the baby was born. Now, you have to imagine what happened next. The Bible doesn't give us much detail, but Zechariah and his division of priests, they left Jerusalem and they walked back to their home. Now picture Zechariah trying to tell his wife Elizabeth all the details about this amazing encounter with the angel and the promise of God and everything that had happened in that temple. But remember, Zechariah couldn't talk. Imagine how frustrating this was for both Zechariah and Elizabeth. I imagine that they played an ancient form of charades. Have you ever played charades? It's an old classic game that you play when someone forgot to bring along the deck of cards. Remember how it goes? What does this mean? Movie, right? What about this? That's a book. Do you remember this clue? It means sounds like. Now, even if you've never played charades, all of you have used your own gestures or your hand motions, even some sign language to talk and communicate. You know what this one means? Yeah, it means time's up, or you're running long, you're out of time. In my first congregation, I had a friend who would sit in the back pew on the left-hand side, and when he thought the sermon was getting too long, he'd raise his hand and he'd go like this, "Time's up, Pastor." So Zechariah, he used charades or some hand motions, and then he grabs Elizabeth's hand, they skip into the bedroom like newlyweds, and she becomes pregnant. This was beyond expectations. Elizabeth knew that this baby growing within her had very little to do with her and Zechariah. It had everything to do with God and God's purpose to make ready a people prepared for Jesus, His Son, the promised Messiah. It was not by Elizabeth's ability that she became pregnant. It was God's ability. Your inability does not prevent God from accomplishing His purpose through you. So no more excuses. No more saying, "I can't do that." Throw that excuse away. Because if it is God's purpose, He can do that in you and through you. When Elizabeth found out that she was pregnant, she hid. She quarantined herself for 5 months. Now, if you think quarantining for 2 weeks is hard because of the virus, Try 5 months. And during that time, she turned to Zechariah and she said, in these days, the Lord has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people. That's what she said. Zechariah, he said nothing. And literally, she said, God has looked upon me and taken away my disgrace. When something amazing happens in your life, when something surprises you for good and exceeds expectation, recognize you didn't make it happen. God did. And God has looked on you. He has not hidden his face from you. Recognize God's favor and give God the credit. See God. See the good that God is doing in your life. Stop every day and celebrate God's favor in your life. Don't rush through life. See his favor and make that a part of your dinner conversation. Text it to a friend that you've been favored. You didn't make it happen. It's not, look at what I did, or look at what we did. It's, look at what God did. God has shown his favor. Now, that does not mean that life was going to be easy for Elizabeth. God's favor does not always result in our comfort. Elizabeth is an old woman, and she's going to go into labor. That's not comfortable. And there are lots of uncertainties and questions still remaining in her life. She may get to watch her son John grow up, but John ends up living in a desert and munching on wild grasshoppers for his meals. And you think your child's a little bit weird. And we don't know if Elizabeth lived long enough to hear that horrible news that her son was beheaded by Herod. Life was not comfortable. Becoming pregnant wasn't the only thing that was beyond expectations. One day when Elizabeth was in her 6th month of pregnancy, there was a knock on her door. It was her cousin Mary. Now, Elizabeth is probably in her 60s or 70s, and Mary is a teenager. We know from verse 36 that they are related, so we assume that they are cousins. Elizabeth wasn't expecting Mary to come. There are no cell phones, no text messaging, no emails in order to plan and prepare and schedule visits. People just showed up, unexpectedly. Mary has traveled 90 miles or so to visit, and Mary is pregnant with Jesus, and Mary is a virgin. Now that is really beyond expectations. Elizabeth blesses Mary, and then Elizabeth is incredulous. Why am I so favored that the mother of my Lord should come to me? Elizabeth saw more than a pregnancy. She saw even more than Mary. What she saw was Jesus, the mother of my Lord. That was God's favor to Elizabeth. God wants to favor you, and God favors you by coming to you. And this is beyond expectations, that God has come to you in his Son, Jesus Christ. God speaks to you in his scriptures. Several years ago, Frederick Buechner, a pastor and a novelist, wrote a book called The Longing for Home. And in that book, he compared the Jesus who was with the Jesus who is. The Jesus who was is a historical Jesus, the Jesus who lived, died, and rose again. Now, friends, there's no doubt about the historical Jesus. He existed. Even non-Christian secular sources testify of the Jesus who was. But do more than remember the Jesus who was. Celebrate the Jesus who is. That the Jesus who is comes into your world of disappointments and darkness, your world of chaos and confusion. And just like it came to Elizabeth, now Jesus comes to you and he speaks to you. He stands before you and he stands with you. See, your life is not typical. Your life is not ordinary. Your life is exceptional as that of Elizabeth. God has surprised you. So that Christmas is more than remembering the past. Christmas is celebrating your present. So that you too will be incredulous and you will say, why am I so favored that my Lord has come to me? What a privilege. What an honor. It humbles us and it amazes us. This is beyond expectations. The greatest favor that God gave Elizabeth was not the gift of a child named John. The greatest favor that God gave Elizabeth was Jesus. That was John's job, to prepare people for Jesus. So Elizabeth said to Mary, "Blessed is she who has believed that what the Lord has said to her will be accomplished." In contrast to her husband Zechariah, who didn't believe, blessed is she who has believed. The word blessed there is different than the first two times it's used back in verse 42. This time the word blessed is the same word that Jesus used when he said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." It can be translated happy. Our culture is on an endless search for happiness. Oh, there's happiness when God gives you children, maybe even tears of happiness. And there will be happiness when the vaccine is distributed. And there will be happiness when you open Christmas presents. But real happiness, lasting happiness, ultimate happiness occurs not in any of those, but in Jesus and believing in Jesus. John was a sign of God's favor to Elizabeth. But you see, there's a better sign, the ultimate sign, the sign that's named Jesus. By ourselves, we are all barren, not just couples who can't have children, but we are all empty and we're searching. So Frederick Buechner wrote, "The Jesus who is the one whom we search for, even when we do not know that we are searching." You can't fix your emptiness with presents that you purchase online. And you aren't going to fix it by wishing things would change. And you aren't going to fix that barrenness at all, but God can fix it. And God does that with his son Jesus. Happiness is believing what the Lord has said to you. See, too often we look for the gift, but we forget the giver of the gift. The other day, I received a Thanksgiving note from someone who was thanking me for the practical applications I give in sermons. You know, God gives us plenty of practical applications. The book of Proverbs is filled with practical applications. But what we need most of all, the most practical application of all, is to see Jesus and to believe that he has come to you. He is the Jesus who is, so that we will be able to say, "Blessed is she who has believed." The end of the story is beyond expectations. Elizabeth has a baby, and according to custom, on the 8th day, it was time for the baby to be circumcised. And it was at the circumcision that the baby was officially given a name. Now, the neighbors and friends assumed that the boy would be called Zechariah, just like his dad. He was going to be Zach Jr. But it was Elizabeth who spoke up, and Elizabeth announced, "His name is John." Now, usually that was not the mom's job to give the name. It was the dad's job. But Zechariah couldn't speak. And so the people started doing that charades thing with Zechariah. "Is she right? Are you sure about that? Is that the name that you want?" And Zechariah grabbed a chalkboard and some chalk, and he confirmed what Elizabeth had announced. His name is John. And then immediately, Zechariah spoke. He spoke for the first time in 9 months, and he exploded with joy and praise to God, because God had shown them favor. By the way, do you know what the name John means? Remember, names are important. John means God has shown favor. explode with joy. Give God praise. God goes beyond your expectations, and God has shown you favor. He has shown you favor in the one named Jesus. If you'd like to know more about this one named Jesus, or if you have any comments or questions about what I've just shared with you, please email me at joel@webstergardens.org. I'd love to hear from you.